Hey, so what I got for you guys today is a great interview about the future of the Cleveland Browns and what the Browns think of some of the young players on their roster who they're high on. This is going to be with Cam Justice, who is a beat reporter for News 5. She's there every day at Browns camp. So, really excited to give you the interview. And I also want to thank today's sponsor, DraftKings. Hey, if you've watched me on any of my live streams, you would know that I yell at the players and coaches as if they can hear me. And I know they can't hear me when I'm yelling at the TV in my chair in my studio, but I can't stop. And I might be far from the court, but I am never far from the action when I'm with my partners, DraftKings Sportsbook, with options to bet on your favorite team, player props, and more. There's something for everyone. And right now, all new customers who bet just $5 will get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Now, that's something to celebrate this season. And depending on how your favorite team's season is going, might not be a lot to celebrate. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, sign up using my promo code WORSTTAKE. The crown is yours. That's right. New customers can bet just $5 on anything and receive $200 in bonus bets instantly. Stay in on the action and use your $200 in bonus bets on DraftKings same game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. Combine multiple bets together from the same game. And if sports betting is not available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have a shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers who use my promo code WORSTTAKE and bet just $5 on any wager get $200 in bonus bets instantly. This promo code WORSTTAKE only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, let's talk about the young players on this team. Dwan Jones has been playing left tackle. Now, as we're recording this video, not sure when this is going to come out. He might have played more games. He might not be playing left tackle anymore. But it is notable that last week they started him over Jedrick Wills, who was game day active. He did play for a couple of sets while Dwan was out. I think, was he in the blue tent or something like that? Or
Shoulder. Yeah, he tweaked his
shoulder,
shoulder.
tweaked his shoulder. Um, one, do you think the Browns is Dwan playing left tackle more of a thing that's coming because of an emergency type situation? Or is that something that they're truly like they want to evaluate him at left tackle going forward in the future? Or do they still see him as a right tackle?
I think it started as the emergency with Jedrick Wills out. Um, and you're weighing your options and then you put Dwan in there. And I think that he played pretty well his first go. Having not played left tackle in the NFL and only a couple times in college, I think that he did a really good job. Some of the grades won't reflect that, but he didn't give up any sacks, two quarterback hurries, one pressure. He did a very decent job for a guy in his second year who has never played on that side, asked to do that super last minute. And and so I think it started as an emergency, and now as of the bye week, he's been named the starting left tackle moving forward. That's where they plan to have him continue to play. I think now it's a matter of, well, this could be a thing. This could be something that really works out. You can't, we've said it when he was on the right side too. You can't teach size. And Dwan Jones, his body, the way he moves and utilizes his body in the blocking game, what he offers you in protection, you can't just create that. He's huge and he's got long arms and he's got just like the perfect body size for when he's in his best shape, right? For a guy that can really be strong in protection and can really do some damage to your opposition, can hold off those defenses. And so I think that he has the potential to be a starting left tackle moving forward for this franchise. And this is the time where you really get to test that out. Does he play comfortably there? Is that something that pans out long term, not just 1 or 2 games? Can he put together a track record that shows that he can play on that side, protect the blind side, and do a really good job there? And I think that so far, 2 games as of this point, as at the bye, yes, he has done a good job, and he can do that. And I think you can expect him to only get better. Now, depending on what defenses are throwing at him and how he handles that, we will see as these weeks move on. But you have Jedrick Wills, the future of Jedrick Wills in question. The contract is going to be up, and
Hmm.
what do you do with him? If Dwan Jones pans out, well, there's your answer. And but then you also weigh into who's available, who do you have in the wings. I don't know that they necessarily have the depth of a starter, a long-term starter, within the practice squad or on the team that's not starting. But I do think that depending on who's available, whether it's free agency or drafting, you also have the future of Jack Conklin up in the air too, right? And so that then
Hmm.
you have to address right tackle. So where Dewan's future stands to me is based on who else they can put on this roster, what other tackles they have. But if he continues to play at this level and improve each game, if he can make improvements each game on the left side, I think that's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest hurdle, is to fill the left tackle position. I think it's a little bit easier to fill. It's not super easy. Obviously, we know it's important on both sides of the line, but that right tackle position, he held the fort down. You've got Jack Conklin this season. The left tackle has been the revolving door of, is this going to work? And so, if they can find somebody else to play right tackle and Dwan plays well throughout the rest of the season at that side, I think you might have an answer there. If it doesn't work out that way, then you're looking, and Dwan maybe moves back to that right side. But the fact that he's been able to play both sides is really promising for his long-term growth and development on this team, in this franchise, and what he's going to be able to do on that offensive line.
Yeah, I also think it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Jed, right? Like, are they going to give him a try out there at right tackle, or do they think his problems are just so far beyond which side he's playing that it doesn't really matter if he plays there at right? I'm sure if he had to play right tackle, they would put him out there. I'm just wondering, like, if they feel like there's anything there with Jed, because it has been a stark decreased the last couple of years in level of play, where he was going from like being a league average tackle to now he's below league average. And I'm wondering, like, if they think, hey, maybe since he's going to be cheaper now, coming off this contract, we can extend him for cheap and get a cheap right tackle option there. Or if they're just like, you know what, we'll just ride it out with Jack Conklin and sign somebody to back him up. And that would make some sense. Or maybe Jed can be the guy who backs up Jack Conklin. Like, I really wonder how they view this whole thing. Is Jed just going to end up where we kind of thought he could end up, as the odd man out in this situation, either in free agency or taking a reduced deal to kind of be a backup here, which I think would be tough to convince him to do on the team that drafted him 10th overall, right? Like, that's
Oh,
just, he gonna be willing to do that in Carolina. He ain't gonna be willing to do that for the team that drafted him. And I think that's just something, like what Jarvis had that thing where he took a cheaper deal in like New Orleans, but he
mhm.
didn't want to take that same deal or a little bit more in Cleveland because it's like it's seen as a demotion, and you don't want to go back in the locker room as a dude who got demoted. And I think that's the same thing with Jed. He don't want to go back in there knowing he got demoted to backup right tackle.
No, he wanted to get paid,
Yeah.
and it's just an unfortunate situation for him, where you have regression. You don't have this is the year when you get the 5th year option, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the year that you want to put your best stuff out there. You want to earn your value. You want to make it undeniable that they need you. And through injury and whatever else, that hasn't been the case. And so he is in a tough position. And it's interesting because it will be a mix of, I think, Browns and him. There will be a deciding factor, and it will have to be something that they both agree on. I'm curious to see how it plays out. And it comes down to the second half of the season and where Dewan's at. And if Dwan doesn't work out, then I think they put Jed back at left, and maybe he gets another opportunity. There's options there, and there's different paths that this could go depending on how the season shakes out. But right now, I think the future of the left tackle is definitely up in the air, and is something that we will start to get a better idea of, and will start to shape itself out as they start to plug different guys in here and there, and work on the development of the young guys, and how this team can move forward after this disappointing year.
Yeah, and I think there's a difference too with when you look at somebody and you bring them in for one thing, right? And it's like I think they don't see Jed anymore as the 10th overall pick in the 2020 draft. They see him as the guy that plays left tackle for us, right? The same thing can be said with Deshaun, where I'm like, he's not going to be cut from the team this offseason. I don't think that's going to happen. But he probably is not going to be viewed as like the hands down, no doubt starting quarterback of the Cleveland. You could just tell by how Andrew Berry talked about him in the press conference. You say, yeah, well, we're going to monitor his return. Like, if that's Joe Burrow, you're like, of course. Like, you're not even taking the question to begin with, right? So I look at like Jed and I'm like, it just might be a situation where it's like how it happened with Jonah Williams in Cincinnati. We're like, we'll bring you back to play right tackle with this amount, but I don't think we're going to play you at left tackle anymore. Like, it just is what it is there. I mean, it's going to depend on what else he gets in the market. I get comments all the time, and I be searching. I'm like, does Jamari Thrash have a podcast or something like that keeps people engaged? Because there is something about him that people love. Maybe this is just like Browns preseason wide receiver fan syndrome, where like Browns fans will fall in love with a dude in the preseason and then ask about this guy all year. Usually it's not like usually it's not a draft pick though, right? It's usually like an undrafted guy or something.
Oh, it's always
like
the
that,
undrafted
right?
guy. Yeah, the preseason hero.
Yeah. So this year, that guy has been Jamari Thrash. Now, I watched Jamari Thrash at Georgia State. I watched him at Louisville. I watched him at the Senior Bowl. He's a prospect that I like, but I think some people, since he's not playing early, get the feeling that he's a bust or that the team thinks he stinks. I like explain to people why that might not be the case and what the Browns are actually doing with Jamari Thrash, even though he's not playing a ton right now.
I will say that from everything I've heard from every level, the Browns love Jamari Thrash. They've loved him from day one. They continue to love him. They like him in the meeting rooms. They like him in the practice setting. I think right now, especially now, and maybe moving forward, you start to see him more. But at the beginning of the year, receivers were struggling. But you have all these new pieces to the offense. You have a new offensive coordinator. You're trying to figure out your thing with your quarterback, and you've got then Jerry Jeudy in the wide receiver room, and you want to figure out how he fits into what they were trying to do. Things did not work out. We saw that very early on, that things were not working out. And then as the Browns, you start to think, okay, well, we got to make a move. We got to do something. You get value from Amari Cooper. They made that trade at the right time. I think they read that market really well. And that was something that needed to happen. I think Amari was ready for a new opportunity. Things were not going well for him here, for the team here. And he was a guy that came with a lot of value. And the Browns knew that. And so now, post Amari, you're still trying to win, but you're not winning and you're still having issues. But you still need to figure out Jerry Jeudy. And truthfully, you need to see if you can figure out, in some regard, Elijah Moore. Because that's the big question mark is, how are you using Elijah Moore? Can he be used? Can he be a big part of an offense? And they haven't been able to really do that at a consistent level at any point of his time here. And so there's all these questions to be answered for the receiver room that's out there right now, that I think that's kind of Jamari had been, I don't want to say like in the shadows, but not the top priority right now. The top priority is figuring out the guys that you're paying a ton of money to, or that you like need to pay a ton of money to keep them, or need to weigh into your game plan, whether it's just what their product is, what their position is. A guy like Elijah Moore that's supposed to be versatile, you do need a guy like that in the room. You need to have that versatility in the wide receivers room. And so you've got the big body receiver in Cedric Tillman, and he's working out really well right now, and that's great. You've got Jerry Jeudy, who's now supposed to be, like a very like one of your top weapons, and they need to, work on that connection obviously too. But then you need a guy that can be put in the slot, that can be a guy that is used in those. I know the fans hate it, the end arounds and things like that. Like every time that happens, I know they hate it, but you like to have a guy like that really does open up your offense. And so they've maybe not done the best job of figuring out how Elijah more specifically works in that. So these questions need to be answered. Now, though, at 2-7 at the bye week, I think maybe you start to, if you're the Browns, you start to think, okay, well, this isn't going the way we think it should be. How can we develop some of these young guys? And we've seen it in different areas, but Jamari Thrash is one of those that I think that could start to see some. He's been inactive, I think, once. Maybe he hasn't played. He hasn't been out there. He hasn't gotten that opportunity. But I think start to see him go from not just inactive and not just being activated, but maybe using the game plan to see how you can start to get him in there. But the Browns like him. It's not that he's not doing a good job, that he's not showing them what they need to, that he's not locked in. He is a big part of what they think can be an explosive offense. It just hasn't they haven't gone to that level yet of seeing what he's got. And I think that they're still high on him. I think they still see some like that potential that you see in college, what made him a draw. I think that he could bring that here. It's just now maybe it's his time. And I hope we start to see some Jamari Thrash out there to see if he can translate that to regular season game action, not just some splashy preseason stuff. But I think he's got it in him, and he's a guy that's really dedicated, and he works really hard to understand what this team wants from him, and he's been patient. So they say, you're supposed to be rewarded for patience. It's a virtue, and he's been patient, and we'll have to hope that you start to see maybe some of that play time go to him as the weeks go on.
Yeah, and I think it's I don't know how many snaps he's played. I know I've seen him out there. I just know he hasn't been targeted yet. But when I look at the future of the Browns, and when I look at, okay, well, this run that they tried to have, it just did not work the way they wanted to. Watson didn't live up to expectations. You had injuries go up and down, right? Like this last 3-year window, I think a lot of people have to admit, okay, it's time to start reloading to the next one. Now, when we start thinking about that, there are a couple of guys who are in an awkward spot. A couple of guys that we know and love and kind of associate with this organization that get put in an awkward spot, right? For me, Joe Bitonio is certainly one of those guys. I don't know how much longer he plans on playing. If he retired this offseason, it would make sense, right? Like he's a 10-year vet. He's played a lot. He's played through injury a ton. It would make sense if he decided like, all right, well, they're about to rebuild. I don't really want to play anywhere else. It might be time, right? If I'm looking at like Nick Chubb, just because of the timeline with running backs, he's coming back from the injury. I'm sure he will have good years after this. But the question is like, hey, if you get let's say best case scenario, you draft a quarterback this offseason, he plays in the middle of that season, right? You're talking about middle of 2025, and then you're ready to compete and try to win it all again in 2026. Well, that's 2 more seasons post a massive knee injury for Nick Chubb, and like is a question of what he's going to look like. Now, again, he's an outlier. Derrick Henry is old too. Derrick Henry looks amazing. Like every time I talk to Tyvis Powell, I am surprised. Like Tyvis, dog, you played against this dude in college. Like every time I talk to him, like Derrick Henry is like you just think of Derrick Henry as being young because he's out here running for like 1,000 yards, 6 yards a carry. But like Derrick Henry been in the league forever, right? And it might be the case for Nick Chubb. We all thought Derrick Henry was cooked, like when he came back from the ACL injury, and now look at him go, right? So who knows? Nick Chubb might have another 5 years left in him. He might be the next Frank Gore. I wouldn't doubt it. But this is an awkward spot, right? Just looking at how they look at running backs. Nick Chubb probably is an outlier, so they give him a little bit more grace on that. But also, you're probably not like going into this thinking, oh yeah, well, it's a great running back class. If like a Ashawn Gentry gets to us, we can't not consider it. It doesn't mean you get rid of Nick Chubb, but it does mean you reduce his role a little bit there. Joe Bitonio, obviously, I mean, it's showing he's getting older. It's been showing for the last few years. And then, is there anybody else that I think puts this team in a bit of an awkward position with their timeline and age? Probably like Jack Conklin, but he's just not as core to this whole thing as like Joel and Nick are. Where do you think they are with this? Like, do you think that they're gonna hang through to the bitter end? Like with Joel, it makes sense, but with Nick Chubb, do you think they're gonna continue to hang through this? I know if it were up to Jimmy, like it don't seem like he going nowhere.
No, I understand, right? The reality of the situation with Nick Chubb and
Mm-hmm.
this business, and we talk about that all the time. This is business. Every player knows that. I do think that Nick Chubb is, as you said, an outlier. I don't think that we can assume anything of a typical business move in the NFL applying to Nick Chubb. The Browns know what they have. There's a couple there's really two guys on this team that mean everything to the organization. It's Nick Chubb and it's Myles Garrett. And without them, this Browns franchise understands what they're missing. And I think that in itself, you saw Andrew Berry, and you can take calls all day, but his answer when he was asked if Myles Garrett was considered in trade talks, no, just no.
It
And
was the quickest no of
no,
all. It was no. What is wrong with you?
like why would you ask? Exactly. Like no, of course not, because it's Myles Garrett, and business is a business, and this tough decisions happen. But at the end of the day, there are some players that supersede that. And I think Nick Chubb is one of those guys. It's why he's an older running back. Right now, he doesn't fit the model of what they're looking at and of a guy that would be an asset for them. But they brought him back through the knee injury, despite not knowing how he was going to come out of that. This is the second of the same injury that he's had. He's had this twice, and it's hard to come back from it one time, let alone two.
Mhm.
And to take a chance on that, and it is a team-friendly situation. Nick Chubb knew that, and I think Nick Chubb will always know that. I don't think Nick Chubb is a guy that is going to be a diva about anything. I think he's a very, very realistic player as well, and he likes it here, obviously. And so I don't think that it is awkward, but I lean more towards the human side and the intangible that Nick Chubb offers this franchise in terms of how they value him. I think there is a higher value on who he is to this organization and to this fan base and to this city that is can't be understated. And I think that plays into where their decision making goes in based off of his age, his production. And I think that that's a big part of it that you can't overlook, because as much as it's not the most important thing, production obviously for a football team is the most important thing. There's a few players that just you can't, and that he's one of them. And Joel Bitonio will retire a Cleveland Brown for sure. I just will it
Mhm.
be after this year, or does he have another one or two in the tank? He's obviously coming up towards the end of his career. He's admitted that. He knows that, like, it's soon. It just how soon? Does he feel like he's got more? Is he confident that next year could result in a better outcome for this team? Could they go back to being contenders, making playoff runs and making the playoffs? We'll see based off of how they come out of the bye, but I think that plays into it too. If you're gonna be in a rebuild, yeah, I mean, if you're one season away, if you really truly think you have at most 2 seasons left in you, and you're not going to be anywhere near a playoff hunt in those 2 seasons, do you do it, or do you call it a career? And that's a decision he'll have to make, and one that he's definitely been weighing for sure. But it will be here. And I think lastly we talked like Jack Conklin. That is one that the Browns. I don't know how they play that one. It depends.
Mhm.
I truly think it comes down to the play that you get from Dwan Jones and the availability of players around the league um, in free agency who might come up, who might be available, who might be involved in maybe trade talks or anything like that. I think the outside situation does play into it, because you have to address the tackles have been that question mark all year with all the injuries and the rotation that's been a big blow to this offensive line, and it's an important part. So I think that the future for Jack is less about Jack Conklin, and what he's doing this year, and more about what is happening around the league and what's happening within the rest of their roster, and the guys they need to see more out of, and to see if, like, okay, we can plug this guy in here. We've got comfortability here. We can go out and get this guy over here.
Yeah, Dwan playing well at left tackle does like make your math so much simpler, right? Because you already have Zinter to plug in there, potentially Luke Whippler, but Ethan Posic's on a cheap enough deal to where it's not going to kill you to keep Posick in there. Wyatt Teller, you could keep him around. It makes sense to have a veteran player there, and then you could figure out right tackle. You could keep it with Jack Conklin. Jack Conklin, as much as he's had injuries, he's not super old, so like you can throw him out there, or you could try to get creative like Jed, or just it's not going to be the hardest thing in the world to find an above average offensive lineman, right? Like a great one, very difficult to find those, but an above average guy, it shouldn't be that hard to find there. And if you can focus on that, I think the Browns, if you look at the offense and like we could get super technical about it and like talk about the scheme or whatever that means to people whenever they say it. I just look at this offense and I go, well, you have a Myles Garrett on defense. You have a Denzel Ward on defense. You have a JOK. You got playmakers on every level on the Browns defense. When I look at this offense, you got Nick Chubb, who he's not there yet, obviously, but he will get there more than likely, right, to a playmaker type level. And then you have guys who can make plays if they're open or make plays if they're there to be made, but they can't create plays, right? Jameis Winston, backup quarterback, you're not going to expect him to make plays. He's going to try, and he's going to create plays for both sides of the ball at times because of that. But you really were hoping that Deshaun Watson would be a playmaker on that level of the team for you, right? Amari Cooper was supposed to be the other guy here. Now, Cedric Tillman has showed me signs. I'm like, oh yeah, he could be a playmaker. Yeah, I think
he might be a playmaker
there. Now, quarterback, getting a playmaker at the quarterback position, obviously the most important thing in all of football. Hear me out though. If let's say your quarterback of choice, whoever guy in the comment section wants, that guy's not there. I would argue that getting A'Shawn Genty and pairing that up with Nick Chubb, or getting an offensive playmaker to assist who's ever the quarterback position, I think running back's the easiest one to do it, because we talk about bridge quarterbacks a ton, right, Cam? We talk about, oh yeah, this guy can be a bridge, that guy can be a bridge. But we don't talk about enough is how much a great running game can bridge your offense for a couple of years, especially when you have somebody employed like Kevin Stefanski, who has showed that he can build an offense that heavily relies on the success of the run game. And I think about that when we're talking about bridge options for quarterback, because Jameis is going to be inherently risky, right? Like maybe you could get your hands on like a Jacoby Brissett, or I've heard things like, and maybe they spring for Kirk Cousins or something like that to compete with Deshaun, or you bring in Justin Fields to compete with Deshaun next year or something. Like it's definitely leaning towards having some level of competition, whether it be a rookie or somebody you bring in off the street. But if you don't think that quarterback's in this draft class, I don't think there's going to be a ton of quarterbacks in 2026. I know we're saying Arch Manning, but we've really seen so little of Arch Manning. And if he's any good, he's the number one overall pick. You should not be number one overall pick bad in the next few years, right? Because then everybody's getting fired if you have a season like this and your number one overall pick bad next year, right? I think if you're not going to take one this year, you should look to 2027. There's some guys in 2027 like, okay, Dylan Raiola, DJ Legway. I'm hearing a lot of smoke about this 2027 class. It's been a lot of true freshmen playing quarterback right now. It's a good sign for that class. So I think if you're the Browns, thinking about doubling down on that run game, it's not a bad idea in my opinion. And it will bridge you into the next guy, and you might not be like in the top 5 in 2027 or anything like that, but I think you will accumulate enough assets playing that way, and enough confidence as an organization in what you can do, that you'll be able to make a move for a guy that you really like in that draft class while also putting them into a situation that will be favorable. So if something does pop up where it's like, oh, I don't want this guy to go to this spot, or you get like I know everybody's worried about it being like an Eli Manning situation with Shedeur Sanders, even though the Browns are probably one of the better situations to force yourself onto, right? It's more just how people externalize their insecurities about how they feel about Cleveland. I don't have any insecurities about Cleveland, so like I don't understand why people would assume that Cleveland is not where somebody would want to go. But like I understand why people think that. I just don't think that shit's true, right? Like I just don't think it's as a deterrent as people think it is. Like Cleveland's somewhere where you can work, and ultimately the NFL is a job, right? And I look at this whole thing and I'm like, okay, this is going to be an interesting strategy, what they do with this year's draft, right? Because I don't want them to take a quarterback because they think they need to. I want them to take one because they love one.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's not the case in this year's draft, which could be the case, then how do you move forward while also knowing like you got Myles Garrett on this team, you got Denzel Ward, you got David Njoku. You're clearly telling everybody you're still trying to win football games, right? Like you did not make the crazy moves everybody was predicted that they make. You stay pat because you think that you could be competitive as early as next year, if not the end of this season. Like they still feel like they can win out, right? Even though it's kind of like we'll see, but but they feel like they should be competitive now. They feel like they'll be competitive next year. This to them, I think we're viewing it as a punishment having this top 5 pick. To them, I wonder if they're viewing this as an opportunity.
I think that they probably are very excited about the possibility. They would rather be winning, right? They'd rather have a better record, but you can't not be excited about the opportunity to have a clear path in which you can plan to get better. It gets a lot more difficult when you're playing poorly and you don't have a way to add talent to your team to address issues that could help you boost yourself into a different level than you saw this year. But I mean, like you mentioned the running game, and I think that is huge to have two backs that you can bounce between and to the complementary. I mean, like look what happened when you had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt together. Everyone loves that combo, and for good reason. They worked really well together when you had that pairing. And I think Jerome Ford was on a position to do very well in terms of stepping up and being a guy that you can rely on in a second back situation. I think he did a decent job when Nick Chubb went down last year. I think that obviously he has a lot more room to grow. And so when you have a situation where you didn't have Nick Chubb and you're still waiting for Nick Chubb to get back to the level that we know Nick Chubb to be at, and you hope and you believe that he can, he's not yet there, right? And that's going to take a little bit of time because naturally he had a terrible injury that took him out for a year. And so now he's got to work his way back to that in game action. But when you have then you got Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong, Deontay Foreman, and is it the level that you need to get that explosiveness? Probably not. And it does not help when the offensive line will tell you off the rip. They've obviously had struggles in protection and pass protection for Deshaun, and then that carries over a little bit into Jameis Winston. I think at a lesser scale, just because of the player that he is. I think a lot of the issues, I truly, not to like rub dirt in any wounds or anything, but I think a lot of the issues with the pass protection were how Deshaun operates out of the pocket and the decisions that he was making in that regard. I think that is that's a big part of it. So now it's about getting back up to your standard, figuring out some of the issues that you're having in protection, but the run blocking has not been super great, and they're admitting that as well. They know that they can do a better job of opening up lanes for Nick Chubb. That's a big part of the production that we'll see from him if their blocking gets better. That's a big part though too of this offense. You have to have a strong offensive line that can do different, they can block in different positions in different ways for this scheme to work. Kevin Stefanski wants an offense that is that marriage of the run and pass game. Yeah, you don't know what you're going to get, and you have a quarterback that can hide that, but you also need an offensive line that can do the job of both if you're going to run plays like that. And so I think it's a twofold. So you hope that you figure out your offensive line and in the Dwan Jones that we talked about, and some of these young guys that can be plugged in, and hopefully have roles in a starting position and providing depth. But then you also then need the talent and the bodies to pair that with it. And so I don't think that would be I wouldn't have an issue with it if you got a strong back to add into that room that can do that, because right now the future of the running back room is up in the air too. I mean, like, you have Deontay Foreman, who's had some strong runs. He had strong runs in training camp, and you thought, okay, maybe he can be that guy to take that next level. But then he was inactive, and you're dealing with that. You don't know
Mhm.
the uncertainty around him, and he's on a 1-year contract. And so you do need somebody else in there. I think you could absolutely use a talent to add, and maybe that boosts Nick Chubb in his production as well, to be able to do that. You're seeing Nick Chubb play third down back, which we haven't seen in really his career. And so now he's taking on different roles. Maybe that's not for
Mhm.
him, or maybe it is, and maybe you need somebody else to shift around that. But right
You
now, I think I wouldn't be mad at it if they
Yeah,
did.
you don't want Nick Chubb to be 30 having to do more than he's ever had to do,
In
right? And
his
I think that,
career.
right, like that's the thing. Now I'm looking at this, I'm like, you need to draft the running back, and that's how you feel, right? When I see Nick Chubb out there blocking, like in the backfield, I'm like, like that you're asking more out of him than you did when he was 25 and he's just
Yeah.
coming off of an ACL surgery, right? Like that can't be a good spot to be in. And like Jerome Ford, maybe he could be the end around guy, right? Like I always am of the opinion that, you should probably put somebody who has some running back skills at that end
At
around
that
position,
position.
right? Because it just kind of makes sense. And maybe they could use Jerome Ford more as kind of a hybrid running back, third running back, wide receiver, because he does do some things well in the receiving game, and he does have that burst and quick play ability. So I think there's still a role for Jerome Ford on this team if you do draft him running back. Like Pierre Strong, Deontay Foreman, those guys are always going to be temporary as far as like the makeup of this team. But I think there's something to do there with Jerome Ford. I think it's going to be interesting. Obviously, I don't think they're done with Nick Chubb. I think they're going to try to put him in a better position to be successful. But right now, they're like, man, we don't have anybody who could pass protect right now. Like, Nick, can you do that? And that's why he's not getting the same amount of carries, is because when Nick Chubb was getting like 15, 20 carries before the injury, or when he was 23, 25, he was only doing those carries, like maybe running a route every once in a while, but he was really only doing that so he was able to rest a lot. Now you're asking him at an older age to be out there blocking, chip releasing, like running routes, and then also running on top of that. And then sometimes you asking him to run the wide zone right after that. And it's not something that you could sustain. And I think you need another, not just a solid running back, right? I think you need another running back. You can think to yourself, he could be top 5 in the league in rushing, right? And I think that's why running back might be a need for the Cleveland Browns, or something that they're looking at that I don't think a lot of people anticipate, because they're just going to look at it as they got Nick Chubb. Are they going to try to be moving on from Nick Chubb? And I don't think it's necessarily exclusively that. Obviously, the torch will be passed as years go on, more than likely, to him if you draft him in the first round. Like, you clearly are going to play that guy a lot. But it also can be something that helps you bridge the gap when you were super uncertain about what the quarterback position is going to look like, and you don't really see any solutions in the first round of that draft. And who knows? They might look at Shedeur Sanders and go, that's the dude, or Cam Ward and say, that's the dude, or Curtis Warwick, or I'm not even gonna throw any more names out there, right? Like, but they might look at one of those guys in college and say that's the guy and go with that. And I'm not gonna be mad at that if they go that route. Or they might say, hey, well, there's nobody here. We'll see what next year's class is, but we're not too confident at. Let's do something to put the offense, get the offense another playmaker, and that will help us kind of solve the problems. Because when I'm watching that game versus the Chargers, I'm like, man, there are plays that could have been made offensively. We just didn't make them, right? And that's what that's what it's going to be when you're going up against a really good defense like the Chargers are. And I wonder, like, going forward, like, yeah, this offense is probably going to look good. But depending on when this video comes out, you might have already seen this offense look good. You might have seen Jameis throw another 3-interception game. They're both on the table as long as the season goes on. But the question is, like, okay, can you get somebody like a Cedric Tillman to step up and consistently be a playmaker? I think what you've seen out of him these last 3 weeks, and I guess it's the last thing, I've held you long enough, Cam. But last thing we'll talk about here is his production since the Amari Cooper trade is stark, right? I think it was 3 weeks ago, right? Because Amari didn't play 1 week when he got traded to Buffalo, right? So it's been 3 weeks. He's had career highs all 3 weeks. And 3 touchdowns in those 3 weeks. And I believe he's over. I think he's about the same in 240 or something like that in receiving yards total. And Amari Cooper's at like 366. Yeah. So he's already like gaining on Amari Cooper's total there. When you see Cedric Tillman out there, do you think, I think this is the one thing about playing Jameis that makes you have to put him out there. He's going to be good for somebody like Cedric Tillman's development, right? He's going to be good for Jerry Jeudy's development because he's going to get the ball to those guys. And how much of this do you think has to do with just him getting the opportunity and like the growth that he's had over the last few weeks? Because it wasn't looking great a couple weeks ago with Cedric Tillman, right? And now it's a different world for him.
Yeah, his journey this season has been really fun to watch. Because I always look for silver linings. This season has been rough, right? And so where's your silver linings? And I think the story of Cedric Tillman is one of them. And that's one that I'm excited to know, like, spoiler alerts, but I'm excited to tell something in the works there. But the journey has been really, really awesome because he went from, especially this season, right? Just think of that drop. That was the game-changing drop. And he was so emotional in the locker room after that. And he was so down. It was really tough to see him mentally have to like go through that. And Amari Cooper was one of the main guys who was in his ear, like, hey, don't sweat it. Look at I've dropped. Amari Cooper was having drops issues all season, right? For the Browns. And so he helped him kind of get a level head. And I really think that benefited because when Amari Cooper then was traded to the Bills, somebody needed to step up. Who was it going to be? Was it going to be Cedric Tillman? Was it going to be Jerry Jeudy? Was it going to be Elijah Moore? Somebody was going to have to step up. And I talked to some of the other guys in the locker room, some of the other receivers, Jalen Darden, right? He's a returner, but he's in that wide receivers room. He's working with them. And he said, yes, we don't have really a vet in the room anymore. Like Jerry Jeudy's the closest thing to a vet. Elijah Moore probably closest thing to a vet, but they're not vets. They're young. And so like Amari Cooper was that veteran leader that they turned to. And Jalen Darden was like, we don't have that right now. So it's someone's time to turn into that. Who is it going to be? Who's going to take that role? And I think Jerry Jeudy has the potential to obviously still to do that. But Cedric Tillman has really taken this opportunity and run with it. And I think it's both because of his dedication to moving past what was a tough start to his season. And also, and just an like you can attribute to who he is as a player, right? That big body guy. He can do a contested catch if he's on his game. He's got the size to do it. He's what they wanted Donovan Peoples-Jones to be and more. That's why they drafted him. They saw him as a higher ceilinged DPJ. And I think you're going to start to see what people were asking out of Donovan Peoples-Jones, what they wanted to see more of that they didn't really get before he went to Detroit. I think you start to see that of Cedric Tillman. And I think it's only up from here for him. And he's Cedric Tillman is actually in a great position this season in terms of his development because you've got a veteran quarterback like Jameis Winston when he's there and he's your starting quarterback as the Browns. You can rely on him to get you looks and to maybe make some really good passes that gives you the opportunity to grow in that regard. But if they turn to Dorian Thompson-Robinson for his development, they have that connection that's undeniable. They've been friends forever. They've played together. They the closest two players in the locker room, maybe aside from the secret friendship of David Njoku and Nick Chubb. I think Dorian and Cedric are two peas in a like they're basically brothers at this point, right? And so he's in a position where then he has that connection to help continue those targets, to continue getting the ball to him, and to continue his growth. So Cedric Tillman is in a really good spot in terms of an individual level of production, and showing what he's going to be able to do for this team. And I'm excited to see it continue, because this is what they want. This is what the Browns wanted when they drafted him. They saw a guy that could play faster than what they had on their roster, to create the versatility of that big body receiver, but also still can be a playmaker, and do really big things for them. And you're starting to see that take shape. And I think that's really great for the Browns, in terms of their future. And then once you start to get him on track, then you can start to address other issues that you want to see maybe corrected. Some more looks to Jerry Jeudy, figuring out where he fits in this and how he can be that playmaker and that receiver that they went out and got. They had been eyeing him forever. And then you can determine the future of Elijah Moore. Does he have a place on this team? Is he a fit for this offense? Can you figure out how to best utilize him, or do you need to turn? But Cedric Tillman is, as of right now, a real gem in terms of a disappointing season turned into, okay, but what are we learning out of this season? I think you're learning that Cedric Tillman could be a major part of this offensive turnaround and the future of this offense, should he continue to develop the way that he is on track to as of the bye week.
All right. Well, Cam, it's always a joy having you on. Make sure you check out her stuff on Twitter, Cami Justice, CAMI Justice, spelled just like how you expect it. Make sure you follow her on Twitter. Please be kind. Don't be one of people complaining about the camera angle. I don't understand why you're the only one who doesn't post poorly shot vertical video and throw that on the timeline. But also make sure you check out the stuff that she does at News 5, and in her Brown segments that you do. Have you been cooking up stuff lately?
Cooking up. Ooh, that was a good segue. Yeah, Mo Eats. It's the segment this year with Maurice Hurst, and we try hot spots around Northeast Ohio, get him some food, and he tries some interesting things. As of now, the latest was Dante. He had tuna tartare, and that's definitely not in his go-to order. But he's going out of his way. He did raw oysters. He's mixing drinks behind the bar. We're having fun. We're having fun in what has been not so fun of a season, but I think that's something that fans should gravitate towards. We got to find something to keep us smiling through the pain.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Did y'all go to a Swenson's? I thought I saw a video where y'all was at a Swenson's.
We went to Swenson's before the Swenson's thing went viral. I'm not pointing fingers or anything. We went there first.
The Swenson's. I know Swenson's went viral. I don't be on.
Swenson's went viral with the Browns. It's all right. We love it. We love to see it. We love to see it. Blessings on everyone. But yes, we went to Swenson's as well. And Mo did try the Galley Boy and the potato teasers and some milkshakes and had the car side experience. It was a great time. You should go back and check it out. It didn't go viral. It's fine. We had a great time. And I think it's a fun segment. So people should check Mo Eats out. It's a great time.
You need to take Mo Eats. You need to take Mo Hurst out there to the east side, get a Polish boy at Mount Pleasant or something like that.
That's the really induction. We took him to Akron. I told him he couldn't be considered a Northeast Ohioan until he had Swenson's, but there's a lot more on the menu that we do have to try out. So again, also, I'm open on Twitter to recommendations. On Instagram, I've had some people shoot me some recommendations that are on the list of places that we will try. So if you've got a hot spot that Mo has to have before he can consider himself a true Ohioan, you got to send him my way.
Right. Make sure you follow Cam Justice so you can also get a say on that and be the third 300th person to suggest that she should go to Barrio. Like, if I know anything about how recommendations work when you ask for them in Cleveland, people just be like, go to Mario. Like,
Which is not a
but
bad recommendation. I do love Barrio, but
you know, every time I make fun of people for suggesting it, but then every time I'm in Cleveland, I end up going to damn Barrio. So like,
how
I
can you
guess,
not?
yeah, I get that pineapple salsa. I'm like, oh, all right, like, I am who I make fun of, I guess. Like, but Cam, thank you for coming on. Everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.